Imagine witnessing a virgin birth that shakes the foundations of everything you thought you knew about the natural world. Imagine a newborn baby speaking fluent words of divine wisdom from his cradle, defending his mother's honor before an astonished crowd. Imagine a chapter of the Qur'an so profound that when the early Muslims recited it to the Christian king of Abyssinia. Before we begin, love to know where are you tuning in from tonight. Share it in the comments below, and let's see how beautifully far and wide the words of the Christian travel. Tears streamed down his face as he declared, "This and what Jesus brought come from the same source." This is Surah Maryam, chapter 19 of the Holy Qur'an, a chapter that doesn't just tell a story, but unveils the miraculous intersection between the human and divine realms. A chapter that challenges our understanding of what's possible when Allah's will meets unwavering faith. Tonight we journey through every verse, every divine sign, every moment of wonder that makes this chapter one of the most beloved and transformative passages in all of Islamic scripture. Allah begins Surah Maryam with something extraordinary, mysterious letters that have captivated scholars for over 14 centuries. Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad. 5 Arabic letters that appear at the opening of this sacred chapter, letters that Islamic scholars call the muqatta'at, the disconnected letters. What makes these letters so significant? Imam Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest Qur'an commentators in Islamic history, explains that these letters serve as a divine challenge. They are the same letters from which the entire Arabic language is constructed, yet when Allah combines them in the Qur'an, they produce something that no human being has ever been able to replicate. These letters are like a master artist showing you his basic colors before painting a masterpiece that leaves you breathless. But there's something even more profound happening here. According to the classical scholar Imam al-Qurtubi, these letters create what he calls a state of divine attention. They stop the listener in their tracks, demanding complete focus before the miraculous narrative begins. It's as if Allah is saying, pay attention, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about my power. The chapter then immediately shifts to something deeply human and relatable. This is a mention of the mercy of your Lord to his servant Zakariya. Notice how Allah doesn't begin with grand cosmic declarations or abstract theological concepts. He begins with mercy is Rahman, the same divine quality that opens every chapter of the Qur'an except one. This isn't coincidental. Sheikh Muhammad Sharawi, one of the most beloved Qur'an interpreters of the modern era, explains that when Allah wants to tell us about the miraculous, he first establishes the foundation of his mercy. Why? Because what we're about to witness, virgin births, speaking infants, and divine interventions might seem impossible or even frightening to the human mind. But when we understand that these miracles flow from Allah's infinite mercy, they become not sources of fear but sources of wonder and hope. The story begins with Zakariya, a prophet of Allah who had spent decades calling people to worship their Creator. But now, in his old age, he faces a deeply personal crisis. His wife is barren, and he has no heir to continue his prophetic mission. The scholars tell us that Zakariya was not asking for a child out of worldly desire for legacy or status. According to Imam at-Tabari, Zakariya's concern was spiritual Ma'as who would carry on the sacred responsibility of guiding the children of Israel after his death. When he called to his Lord a private call, the Qur'an describes Zakariya's prayer as nida kafirian, a secret, intimate plea. This wasn't a public display of desperation, but a quiet, humble conversation between a servant and his Lord. Imam al-Ghazali writes that this type of prayer represents the highest form of worship, when a person pours out their heart to Allah, not for others to hear, but from pure sincerity and need. But here's where the narrative takes an unexpected turn that will set the stage for everything that follows. Zakariya's prayer is answered in the most miraculous way. Allah grants him a son, Yahya, John the Baptist, who will be born to elderly parents, challenging the natural order of things. This miracle becomes the opening note in a symphony of divine interventions that will culminate in the most extraordinary birth in human history. The scholars point out a crucial detail here. According to Ibn Abbas, the cousin of Prophet Muhammad, Allah chose to begin this chapter with Zakariya's story not just as background but as preparation. Before he tells us about Mary's virgin birth, he first shows us that he can grant children to the elderly and barren. It's as if Allah is gradually expanding our understanding of what's possible, preparing our hearts and minds for the even greater miracle to come. This divine pedagogy decay, this method of teaching, decays throughout the Qur'an. Allah doesn't shock us with the impossible. Instead, he leads us step by step, miracle by miracle, until we reach a state where even the most extraordinary manifestations of his power seem not only possible, but inevitable expressions of his limitless ability. As we stand at the threshold of Mary's story, we must understand that we're not simply reading about events that happened centuries ago. According to the great scholar Imam al-Alasi, every verse in this chapter is designed to speak to the human soul across all times and places. The challenges that Zakariya faced, aging, uncertainty about the future, the desire to see God's work continued. These are universal human experiences. But most importantly, the response that Allah gives to Zakariya's prayer establishes a crucial principle that will echo throughout the entire chapter. When Allah wills something, He simply says be, and it is. This divine command, Inokin Siakun, becomes the foundation upon which all the miracles in Surah Maryam. The stage is now set. We've witnessed Allah's power to create life where none seemed possible. We've seen His mercy respond to the sincere prayer of His servant, and we've been reminded that His will transcends all natural limitations. What follows is the story of a young woman whose faith would be tested in ways that no human being has ever experienced, and whose trust in Allah would result in a miracle that continues to inspire and guide humanity more than 2,000 years later. Now Allah turns our attention to the central figure of this blessed chapter, Maryam. But before we learn about her miraculous story, we must understand something profound about how Allah introduces her in His holy book. She is not merely mentioned as a historical figure, or even as the mother of one of the greatest prophets. She is presented as a divine choice, a selection made by Allah Himself from among all the women who have ever lived. And mention, O Muhammad, in the book the story of Maryam when she withdrew from her family to a place toward the east. The Arabic word used here for mention is wadkul, but this isn't just a casual reference. According to Imam al-Bakawi, this is a command from Allah to His final messenger to honor and commemorate Mary's story for all of humanity until the end of time. Every time we recite these verses, we are fulfilling a divine instruction to remember and honor this remarkable woman. The scholars tell us something extraordinary about Mary's position in Islamic theology. She is the only woman mentioned by name in the entire Qur'an, appearing 34 times across multiple chapters. But more than frequency, it's the context of these mentions that reveals her true status. Imam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani explains that when Allah wants to honor someone in the Quran, He doesn't just tell their story, He makes their story a source of guidance and reflection for all believers. Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, one of the most respected scholars of recent times, points out that Maryam's introduction in this chapter follows a unique pattern. Unlike other figures in the Quran who are often introduced with their genealogy or their people's response to them, Maryam is introduced through her action, her withdrawal to worship Allah. This immediately establishes that her defining characteristic is not her family background or social status, but her personal devotion to her Creator. The phrase "when she withdrew from her family to a place toward the east" carries profound significance in Islamic interpretation. The Arabic word intabada suggests not a permanent separation but a deliberate spiritual retreat. Imam at-Tabari explains that this withdrawal represents the highest form of seeking closeness to Allah, removing oneself from all distractions to focus entirely on worship and contemplation. But why specifically toward the east? The classical scholars offer beautiful insights into this detail. According to Ibn Abbas, the east represents the direction of light, hope, and new beginnings. When Maryam withdrew toward the east, she was symbolically positioning herself to receive divine illumination. This wasn't mere geographical movement, it was spiritual positioning for what Allah had destined for her. The great scholar Imam al-Qushayri adds another layer of meaning. He explains that Maryam's eastward retreat represents the soul's journey away from the darkness of worldly attachments toward the light of divine proximity. In Islamic mystical tradition, this movement toward the east becomes a metaphor for every believer's spiritual journey. The constant movement away from what distances us from Allah toward what brings us closer to Him. What makes Maryam's character so remarkable is not just her devotion but the purity of her intentions. The Quran tells us in Surah Al-Imran that Allah chose her, purified her, and selected her above all the women of the worlds. Imam Ibn Kathir explains that this divine selection wasn't arbitrary. It was based on her exceptional qualities of faith, chastity, devotion, and complete surrender to Allah's will. The word purified here, taharaki, carries multiple dimensions of meaning. According to the linguistic analysis of Imam Raghib al-Isfahani, this purification encompasses physical purity, spiritual cleanliness, and moral excellence. Maryam wasn't just physically chaste, she was purified in every aspect of her being, making her a suitable vessel for the miraculous conception that was to come. Sheikh Muhammad al-Aman ash-Shanqiti emphasizes that Maryam's selection represents a crucial principle in Islamic theology. Allah's choices are based on spiritual merit, not worldly status. In a time and culture where women had limited social standing, Allah elevated a young woman to a position of honor that surpasses kings and rulers. This divine selection challenges human notions of value and worth, establishing that true nobility lies in piety and devotion to Allah. The scholars also draw our attention to the timing of Maryam's introduction in this chapter. She appears immediately after the story of Zakariya and the miraculous birth of Yahya. This sequencing is not coincidental. Imam al-Alusi explains that Allah is gradually preparing our minds and hearts for the even greater miracle to come. First, he shows us an elderly couple blessed with a child despite their advanced age. Then he introduces us to a young virgin who will conceive without any human father at all. This divine pedagogy, this method of teaching reveals Allah's wisdom in guiding human understanding. He doesn't overwhelm us with the impossible. Instead, he leads us step by step, expanding our conception of what's possible through his power, until we reach a state where even the most extraordinary miracles seem like natural expressions of his limitless ability. But perhaps most importantly, Maryam's introduction establishes her as more than just a participant in a miraculous event. She becomes a symbol, a representation of the human soul's potential when it completely surrenders to Allah's will. Her withdrawal from her family, her eastward journey, her chosen solitude, all of these actions demonstrate a soul that has prioritized its relationship with Allah above all worldly considerations. As we prepare to witness the extraordinary events that will unfold in her life, we must remember that Maryam's story is not just historical narrative, it's spiritual instruction. Every detail of her character, every aspect of her devotion, every moment of her trust in Allah becomes a lesson for believers of all generations about the transformative power of complete faith and surrender to the divine will. Before we delve deeper into Maryam's miraculous story, we must pause to understand how Allah himself bears witness to her extraordinary status in his holy book. The Quranic testimony about Maryam is unlike the description given to any other woman in Islamic scripture, and these divine declarations lay the foundation for everything we're about to witness. In Surah Al-Imran, Allah declares, "And remember when the angels said, 'O Maryam, indeed Allah has chosen you and purified you, and chosen you above the women of all the worlds.'" The repetition of the word chosen, Namsistafaki, this single verse is not accidental. According to Imam Fakhar ad-Din ar-Razi, this repetition emphasizes two distinct levels of divine selection. The first choice relates to her spiritual purification and moral excellence, while the second choice relates to the specific miraculous role she would play in human history. The phrase "above the women of all the worlds," Allah Nisa Allah Main, has profound implications that the classical scholars have explored extensively. Imam ibn Jarir at-Tabari explains that this doesn't merely mean she was the best woman of her time, but that she holds this distinction across all of human history, past, present, and future. This divine testimony places Maryam in a category entirely her own among womankind. But what makes this divine declaration even more remarkable is its context within the broader Quranic narrative. Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen points out that when Allah wants to emphasize someone's importance in the Quran, he often uses the voices of angels to make the announcement. The fact that angels, the most honored of Allah's creation, are instructed to inform Maryam of her selection indicates the cosmic significance of her role. The word purified, Taharaki, this deserves special attention from a linguistic and theological perspective. According to the renowned Arabic linguist Al-Khalil ibn Omad, this term encompasses multiple dimensions of purity: physical, spiritual, moral, and even genealogical. Imam al-Qurtubi adds that this purification was not something Maryam achieved through her own efforts alone, but rather a divine grace bestowed upon her by Allah, preparing her for the extraordinary role she would fulfill. The Qur'an provides us with another crucial testimony about Maryam in Surah At-Taryam, and Maryam, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, so we breathed into her of our spirit, and she believed in the words of her Lord and his scriptures, and was of the devoutly obedient. This verse reveals 4 distinct qualities that Allah himself attributes to Maryam: her chastity, her reception of divine spirit, her belief in Allah's revelation, and her complete obedience. The phrase guarded her chastity, Asanat, Farjaha, is particularly significant. Imam Ibn Kathir explains that this wasn't merely about physical purity, but represented a comprehensive protection of her honor, dignity, and spiritual integrity. In a world where women's value was often reduced to their relationships with men, Maryam's chastity represented her independence and her direct relationship with Allah, unmediated by any human authority. The expression "we breathed into her of our spirit," Honafakna fihi min ruhina, represents one of the most mysterious and profound statements in the entire Qur'an. The great scholar Imam al-Ghazali writes that this divine breath represents the direct intervention of Allah's creative power, bypassing all natural causes and means. It's the same divine breath that gave life to Adam, connecting Maryam's miraculous conception to the very origin of human creation. What's remarkable about these Quranic testimonies is how they prepare us for the miraculous events to come while simultaneously establishing their theological legitimacy. Allah doesn't simply narrate extraordinary events and expect us to accept them blindly. Instead, he first establishes the spiritual credentials of the person through whom these miracles will manifest. The scholars also draw our attention to how these divine declarations frame Maryam's role in salvation history. According to Imam as-Suyuti, one of the most prolific commentators in Islamic history, Maryam's selection represents a crucial link in the chain of divine guidance sent to humanity. Through her, Allah would send Isa, Jesus, as a sign and mercy to the world, continuing the line of prophetic guidance that began with Adam and would conclude with Muhammad, peace be upon them all. The timing of these declarations is also significant. According to Ibn Abbas, these angelic announcements came to Maryam during her youth, long before the miraculous conception occurred. This suggests that Allah was preparing her psychologically and spiritually for the extraordinary events that would unfold in her life. The divine declarations served as both honor and preparation, both recognition and responsibility. Sheikh Abdurrahman as-Saidi emphasizes that these Quranic testimonies serve a crucial function for believers across all generations. They establish that the miraculous events in Maryam's life were not random supernatural occurrences, but carefully planned divine interventions carried out through a person who had been specifically chosen and prepared by Allah for this role. The cumulative effect of these divine declarations creates what classical scholars call divine authentication, Allah's own testimony to the truth and significance of what we're about to witness. When we read about the miraculous conception, the speaking infant, and the divine vindication that follows, we do so with the understanding that these events occurred through someone whom Allah himself had chosen, purified, and elevated above all other women. This divine authentication serves another crucial purpose. It transforms our reading of Maryam's story from mere historical narrative to spiritual contemplation. We're not just learning about events that happened centuries ago. We're witnessing Allah's demonstration of His power, mercy, and wisdom through a human being who exemplified the highest levels of faith and devotion. As we stand on the threshold of the miraculous events themselves, these divine declarations remind us that we're about to witness not just the impossible becoming possible, but the divine will manifesting through a soul that had been perfectly prepared to receive and embody Allah's grace. The stage is set, the divine credentials established, and the greatest miracle in human history is about to unfold through a young woman whom Allah had chosen from among all the women of all the worlds. To truly understand the magnitude of what Allah accomplished through Maryam, we must first examine the spiritual foundation that was laid generations before her birth. The Qur'an doesn't begin Maryam's story with her own life, but rather with the profound faith and devotion of her mother Hannah and the family lineage that produced such an extraordinary woman. This generational preparation reveals Allah's wisdom in how He prepares vessels for His greatest miracles. The story begins in Surah Ali Imran with a woman who would become known in Islamic tradition as Hannah bint Fath, though the Qur'an refers to her simply as the wife of Imran. According to Imam ibn Kathir, Hannah and her husband Imran were from the noble lineage of the children of Israel, descendants of the prophetic line that included Dawood and Suleiman, peace be upon them. But their nobility wasn't merely genealogical, it was spiritual, rooted in their unwavering commitment to serving Allah. The classical scholars tell us that Imran was a learned man deeply versed in the scriptures and devoted to teaching the people about Allah's guidance. Hannah, meanwhile, was known for her piety, her generous spirit, and her deep longing to contribute something meaningful to Allah's cause. Together they represented the ideal of a household built on faith, knowledge, and service to the Creator. But there was one source of deep sadness in their lives. They had been blessed with wealth, status, and respect, but not with children. In their culture and time, childlessness was often viewed as a sign of divine displeasure, and the pain it caused went beyond the personal desire for family. It represented what seemed like an inability to contribute to the continuation of righteous lineage. The Qur'an captures Hannah's profound moment of spiritual transformation with these words: "When the wife of Imran said, 'My Lord, indeed I have pledged to you what is in my womb, consecrated for your service, so accept this from me. Indeed you are the hearing, the knowing.'" This prayer, according to Imam at-Tabari, wasn't made in a moment of casual hope, but during a profound spiritual experience that changed the course of history. The scholars explain that Hannah's vow represents one of the most selfless acts recorded in religious history. According to Imam al-Qutubi, she wasn't asking Allah for a child to fulfill her own maternal desires or to enhance her social status. Instead, she was offering to dedicate her unborn child entirely to Allah's service, essentially asking to become a mother for the sake of serving Allah rather than for personal fulfillment. The Arabic word used for her pledge, nazar too, carries deep theological significance. According to the linguistic analysis of Imam al-Raghib al-Isfahani, this term represents the highest form of voluntary dedication to Allah, a commitment that once made becomes binding and sacred. Hannah wasn't making a casual promise, she was entering into a sacred covenant with her Creator. But Allah's response to Hannah's prayer reveals His infinite wisdom and the limitations of human understanding. When she gave birth, she discovered she had a daughter, not the son she had expected would serve in the temple. Her immediate reaction, recorded in the Qur'an, shows both her humanity and her faith. "My Lord, I have delivered a female." And Allah was most knowing of what she delivered. And the male is not like the female. The phrase "the male is not like the female" has been interpreted by scholars in multiple ways, each revealing different aspects of Allah's wisdom. According to Ibn Abbas, these words can be understood as Hannah's initial disappointment, since temple service was traditionally reserved for males. However, Imam ibn Kathir suggests that these words may actually be Allah's own declaration, indicating that this female child would serve Allah in ways that no male could ever accomplish. The great scholar Imam as-Suyuti offers perhaps the most profound interpretation, that Allah was revealing through these words that he was not bound by human customs or expectations. While society might have valued male children more highly for religious service, Allah was about to demonstrate that his greatest miracle would come through a female, not despite her gender, but because of the unique role that only a woman could fulfill in his divine plan. Hannah's response to discovering she had a daughter reveals the depth of her faith and trust in Allah's wisdom. Rather than expressing disappointment or trying to modify her vow, she named her daughter Maryam, a name that in Hebrew means wished-for child or beloved of Allah, and made an additional prayer that would prove prophetic. "And I seek refuge for her in you and her descendants from Satan the expelled." This prayer for divine protection, according to authentic hadith narrated by Abu Huraira, was answered in the most extraordinary way. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, explained that every human being is touched by Satan at birth except for Maryam and her son Isa. This divine protection, granted in response to Hannah's sincere prayer, prepared Maryam for the miraculous role she would play in Allah's plan. The scholars emphasize that Hannah's story teaches us crucial lessons about the nature of sincere devotion to Allah. Imam ibn Taymiyyah writes that true faith often requires us to offer Allah our most precious possessions, in Hannah's case her long-awaited child, trusting that his wisdom surpasses our understanding of what's best. The generational foundation laid by Hannah and Imran created the spiritual environment necessary for Maryam's extraordinary development. According to Imam al-Ghazali, when parents dedicate their children to Allah's service with sincere hearts, Allah takes special care of those children, preparing them for roles in His plan that the parents themselves might never have imagined. Hannah's story also reveals Allah's method of preparing for His greatest miracles. He doesn't simply create extraordinary events out of nothing. He builds them through generations of faith, sacrifice, and devotion. The virgin birth of Isa wasn't an isolated supernatural event, but the culmination of a process that began with Hannah's selfless prayer and continued through Maryam's devoted upbringing. As we prepare to witness Maryam's own story unfold, we must remember that her extraordinary faith and devotion didn't emerge in a vacuum. They were the fruit of generational dedication to Allah, nurtured by a mother who had willingly given her most precious gift to her Creator's service. In Hannah's story, we see that Allah's greatest miracles often begin not with dramatic announcements but with the quiet, sincere prayers of faithful souls who trust in His wisdom, even when they cannot understand His plan. When Maryam was born, Hannah faced what many scholars consider one of the most profound tests of faith recorded in Islamic history. She had made a sacred vow to dedicate her child to Allah's service, expecting a son who could serve in the temple according to the customs of her people. Instead, she was blessed with a daughter in a society where female children were not traditionally accepted for temple service. This moment would test not only Hannah's faith but also reveal Allah's wisdom in transcending human limitations and social conventions. The Qur'an captures Hannah's initial uncertainty with remarkable honesty, but when she delivered her, she said, "My Lord, I have delivered a female," and Allah was most knowing of what she delivered. The repetition here, that Allah was most knowing, serves a crucial purpose according to Imam al-Baydawi. It reminds us that while Hannah was surprised by the outcome, Allah had planned this from the beginning, and His plan was far greater than anything Hannah could have imagined. According to the classical commentator, Imam Mujahid, Hannah's reaction represents the natural human tendency to measure divine gifts by societal standards rather than by Allah's infinite wisdom. She wasn't rejecting her daughter or expressing ingratitude. She was simply struggling to understand how this outcome aligned with her sacred vow. This moment of uncertainty makes Hannah profoundly relatable to believers across all generations who sometimes struggle to reconcile their expectations with Allah's plan. But Hannah's faith proved stronger than her initial confusion. Rather than abandoning her vow or seeking to modify it, she proceeded to fulfill her commitment to Allah in the most beautiful way. She named her daughter Maryam, and made a prayer that would echo through the corridors of history. And I seek refuge for her in you and for her descendants from Satan the expelled. The significance of this prayer cannot be overstated. According to authentic hadith literature, particularly the narration from Abu Huraira, this prayer was accepted by Allah in the most extraordinary manner. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, explained that every human being is touched by Satan at the moment of birth, causing them to cry, except for Maryam and her son Isa. This divine protection, granted in response to Hannah's sincere supplication, would prepare Maryam for the unique spiritual trials she would face. The scholars explain that Hannah's prayer reveals deep theological insight. According to Imam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Hannah understood that dedicating her child to Allah's service meant more than just physical placement in the temple. It meant spiritual protection from all forces that could distance the soul from its creator. Her prayer for refuge from Satan demonstrates her recognition that the greatest service to Allah requires protection from spiritual corruption. The fulfillment of Hannah's vow also required a practical solution to an unprecedented situation. Since temple service was traditionally limited to males, what would happen to this female child who had been dedicated to Allah's service? The answer came through divine providence in the form of a drawing of lots among the religious leaders of the community. According to Ibn Abbas, multiple righteous men offered to take responsibility for Maryam's care, recognizing the spiritual significance of her dedication. However, it was Prophet Zakariya who was ultimately chosen through what the scholars describe as divine selection disguised as chance. Imam at-Tabari explains that while the lots appeared random to human observers, Allah was guiding the process to ensure that Maryam would be raised by someone perfectly suited for her unique spiritual development. The choice of Zakariya as Maryam's guardian represents what scholars call divine synchronicity, the perfect alignment of circumstances to serve Allah's greater plan. Zakariya was not only a prophet with direct access to divine guidance, but according to some narrations, he was also related to Maryam through his wife, who was Hannah's sister. This family connection, combined with his prophetic status, created the ideal environment for Maryam's spiritual development. Imam al-Qutubi emphasizes that Zakariya's guardianship of Maryam was more than mere caretaking. It was a form of spiritual mentorship that would prepare her for the extraordinary role Allah had planned for her. Under his guidance, she would develop the deep faith, unwavering trust, and complete devotion to Allah that would enable her to accept and endure the miraculous events that lay ahead. The arrangement also reveals Allah's wisdom in honoring both the letter and spirit of Hannah's vow. While Maryam couldn't serve in the temple in the traditional male role Hannah had envisioned, she would serve Allah in a way that surpassed any conventional temple service. She would become the vessel through which one of Allah's greatest signs would manifest, serving not just her local community but all of humanity. The test that Hannah faced, accepting Allah's plan even when it differed from her expectations, represents a fundamental challenge that all believers encounter. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah writes that true faith requires us to trust Allah's wisdom even when His plan doesn't align with our understanding or our society's conventions. Hannah's willingness to proceed with her vow despite the apparent complications demonstrates the kind of faith that Allah honors and through which He accomplishes His greatest works. The scholars also point out that Hannah's test prefigures the much greater test that Maryam herself would face years later. Just as Hannah had to trust Allah's plan when it defied social conventions, Maryam would have to trust Allah's plan when it defied the very laws of nature. The faith that Hannah demonstrated in honoring her vow despite uncertainty laid the foundation for the faith that Maryam would demonstrate in accepting her miraculous pregnancy despite its apparent impossibility. This generational pattern of faith being tested and proven reveals one of Allah's methods for preparing extraordinary events. According to Imam as-Suyuti, Allah often tests the faith of parents before accomplishing great works through their children. The strength of faith demonstrated by one generation becomes the spiritual foundation upon which the next generation can build even greater acts of trust and devotion. As we witness Hannah fulfilling her sacred vow and entrusting her precious daughter to Zakariya's care, we see the final pieces falling into place for the extraordinary story that will unfold. Hannah's test of faith has been passed. Maryam's spiritual protection has been secured, and her divinely appointed guardian has been chosen. The stage is now set for the remarkable spiritual development that will prepare this young girl for the most miraculous events in human history. The test of sacred responsibility that Hannah faced reminds us that serving Allah often requires us to release our expectations and trust His greater wisdom. In her willingness to honor her vow even when the outcome differed from her plans, we see the kind of faith that opens the door for Allah's most extraordinary blessings. Through her test, Allah was not only honoring her devotion, but preparing the path for miracles that would guide and inspire humanity until the end of time. Allah's response to Hannah's faithful fulfillment of her vow reveals one of the most profound principles in Islamic theology. When a servant sincerely dedicates something to Allah's service, He takes special care of that offering in ways that surpass all human expectations. The story of how Allah received Maryam and orchestrated her upbringing demonstrates His infinite wisdom in transforming what appeared to be a complication into the foundation for the greatest miracle in human history. The Qur'an tells us, "So her Lord accepted her with good acceptance and caused her to grow in a good manner and put her in the care of Zakariya." The Arabic phrase tekabalaha rabuha boikwa boilin hazanin carries multiple layers of meaning that reveal Allah's special attention to this dedicated child. According to Imam al-Razi, the word tekabala doesn't simply mean accepted. It implies enthusiastic reception, as if Allah was welcoming this offering with particular pleasure and satisfaction. The phrase caused her to grow in a good manner, meta'olah nabatan hazanan, uses agricultural metaphors that the scholars find deeply significant. Imam Ibn Kathir explains that just as a skilled gardener provides the perfect conditions for a precious plant to flourish, Allah personally oversaw Maryam's development, ensuring that every aspect of her growth, physical, spiritual, intellectual and moral mile proceeded according to his perfect plan. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Allah's response was his choice of guardian for Maryam. The selection of Prophet Zakariya wasn't random or merely convenient, it represented divine wisdom in matching the perfect mentor with a child destined for an extraordinary role. According to the classical scholars, Zakariya possessed a unique combination of qualities that made him ideally suited for this responsibility. Imam at-Tabari describes Zakariya as a man of profound knowledge, unwavering faith and gentle character. As a prophet, he had direct access to divine guidance and could recognize and nurture the spiritual gifts that would emerge in Maryam. As an elderly man who had long prayed for a child of his own, he would cherish and care for Maryam with the tenderness of a father. Most importantly, as someone deeply familiar with Allah's power to accomplish the impossible, he would be able to guide Maryam through the miraculous events that lay ahead. The arrangement of Maryam's guardianship also reveals Allah's wisdom in transcending social limitations. In a society where women's religious education was often limited, Allah ensured that Maryam would receive the most comprehensive spiritual training possible. Under Zakariya's guidance, she would not only learn the scriptures and religious practices, but would develop the deep personal relationship with Allah that would sustain her through the trials ahead. According to Ibn Abbas, Zakariya created a special environment for Maryam's development. He arranged for her to have a private chamber in the temple, in Mihrab, where she could worship without distraction and grow in her devotion to Allah. This chamber wasn't just a physical space but represented a spiritual sanctuary where the young Maryam could develop the profound connection with her Creator that would define her entire life. The scholars emphasize that this special chamber served multiple purposes in Allah's plan. It provided Maryam with the solitude necessary for deep spiritual development, protected her from the distractions and temptations of worldly life, and created an environment where the miraculous provisions that Allah would send could be witnessed and appreciated. Most importantly, it established a pattern of seeking closeness to Allah through retreat and contemplation that would serve her well during the most challenging moments of her life. But Allah's special care for Maryam extended beyond just providing ideal circumstances for her upbringing. The Qur'an hints at supernatural provisions that began appearing even during her childhood. Every time Zakariya entered upon her in the prayer chamber he found with her provision, he said, "O Maryam, from where is this coming to you?" She said, "It is from Allah." Indeed, Allah provides for whom He wills without account. These miraculous provisions represent one of the most fascinating aspects of Maryam's early life. According to the commentators, Zakariya would find her with fruits that were out of season, foods that couldn't be obtained through normal means, and sustenance that appeared without any human source. Imam al-Qurtubi explains that these provisions served multiple purposes. They demonstrated Allah's special care for Maryam, they prepared Zakariya to accept the even greater miracle that would come later, and they trained Maryam to recognize and rely upon Allah's direct intervention in her life. The dialogue between Zakariya and Maryam about these provisions reveals crucial insights into both of their characters. Zakariya's question shows his natural human curiosity about these supernatural occurrences, while Maryam's response demonstrates her complete acceptance of Allah's power and generosity. Her simple statement, "It is from Allah," reveals a level of spiritual maturity and trust that was remarkable for someone so young. Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen points out that Maryam's response to these miraculous provisions established a pattern that would define her entire relationship with Allah. She didn't question how or why these blessings came. She simply accepted them with gratitude and recognized them as signs of Allah's care. This unquestioning acceptance of divine gifts would serve her well when she would later be asked to accept the ultimate divine gift, conception without a human father. The impact of witnessing these provisions on Zakariya himself becomes a crucial part of the narrative. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, seeing Allah's direct provision for Maryam inspired Zakariya to make his own prayer for a child, despite his advanced age and his wife's barrenness. The miracles surrounding Maryam's upbringing served as a reminder to him of Allah's power to accomplish the impossible, leading to the miraculous birth of his own son Yahya, John the Baptist. This interconnection between Maryam's and Zakariya's stories reveals another aspect of Allah's wisdom. By blessing Maryam with miraculous provisions, Allah was not only caring for her but also preparing Zakariya for his own miracle. The supernatural events surrounding Maryam's childhood created an environment where the impossible seemed possible, where faith in Allah's unlimited power became not just theological doctrine, but lived experience. The scholars also note that Allah's unexpected response to Hannah's vow established important principles about divine acceptance of sincere offerings. According to Imam al-Ghazali, when someone dedicates something precious to Allah's service with a pure heart, Allah doesn't just accept that offering, He elevates it, protects it, and uses it in ways that surpass the giver's wildest imagination. Hannah offered her child for temple service. Allah accepted that child for service to all humanity. The divine response to Hannah's vow also demonstrates that Allah's plans often unfold in ways that initially seem contrary to human expectations, but ultimately reveal superior wisdom. What appeared to be a complication, having a daughter instead of a son, became the foundation for events that would impact all of human history. Through this unexpected path, Allah was teaching Hannah, Zakariya, and all believers that His wisdom transcends human understanding and social conventions. As we witness Allah's careful orchestration of Maryam's upbringing, we see the meticulous preparation that preceded the miraculous events to come. Every detail, her dedicated mother, her prophetic guardian, her sacred chamber, her miraculous provisions was part of a divine plan to prepare a young woman for the most extraordinary role any human being has ever been asked to fulfill. In Allah's unexpected response to a mother's sincere vow, we see the beginning of a miracle that would illuminate the path of guidance for all humanity. The protection that Allah bestowed upon Maryam from her earliest moments reveals the extraordinary care with which He prepares those chosen for significant roles in His divine plan. This protection wasn't merely physical or social, it was a comprehensive spiritual shielding that would enable her to develop the pure faith and unwavering trust necessary for the miraculous events that lay ahead. Understanding this divine protection helps us appreciate both the magnitude of Allah's care and the importance of the mission for which Maryam was being prepared. The foundation of this protection was established through Hannah's prophetic prayer, "And I seek refuge for her in you and for her descendants from Satan the expelled." According to the authentic hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, this prayer was answered in the most remarkable way. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, explained that every human being is touched by Satan at the moment of birth, which is why newborns cry. However, Maryam and her son Isa were exceptions to this universal experience. They were born without Satan's touch, remaining pure from their very first breath. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani explains that this protection represented more than just a moment of birth. It established a spiritual barrier that would shield Maryam throughout her life from the whispers and temptations that affect other human beings. This divine protection created the spiritual environment necessary for her to develop the extraordinary level of faith and purity that would make her suitable for the miraculous conception that was to come. The scholars emphasize that this protection wasn't arbitrary favoritism, but rather divine wisdom in preparing the perfect vessel for one of Allah's greatest signs. According to Imam an-Nawawi, just as a precious gem requires special protection to maintain its purity and beauty, Allah provided special protection for Maryam to ensure that her spiritual development would proceed without the corrupting influences that typically affect human souls. Under Zakariya's guidance, this divine protection manifested in the careful structuring of Maryam's daily life. The special chamber, the Maryam, that was prepared for her wasn't just a place of worship, but a spiritual sanctuary where she could develop her relationship with Allah without distraction. According to Ibn Kathir, this chamber was positioned in such a way that Maryam could worship in complete privacy, away from the eyes of others and the potential distractions of social interaction. The scholars describe Maryam's daily routine as a perfect balance of worship, study, and contemplation. According to At-Tabari, she would spend her days in prayer, recitation of the scriptures, and quiet reflection on Allah's signs. This wasn't the passive worship of someone merely going through religious motions, but the active, engaged devotion of someone developing a deep personal relationship with her Creator. Imam al-Qurtubi emphasizes that Maryam's worship was characterized by what Islamic spirituality calls presence of heart, a complete focus and awareness of Allah's presence that transforms routine religious actions into profound spiritual experiences. This quality of worship, nurtured under divine protection and prophetic guidance, would later enable her to receive and accept the most extraordinary divine message with unwavering faith. The miraculous provisions that regularly appeared in Maryam's chamber served not only as demonstrations of Allah's care, but as practical lessons in trusting divine providence. According to the classical commentators, these provisions often included fruits that were out of season, foods that couldn't be obtained through normal means, and sustenance that appeared without any identifiable source. Each time Zakariya discovered these provisions and questioned their origin, Maryam's consistent response, "It is from Allah," reinforced her growing understanding that Allah's power transcends all natural limitations. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen points out that these regular miraculous experiences served a crucial educational purpose. They trained Maryam to expect and accept divine intervention as a normal part of her relationship with Allah. This training would prove essential when she would later be asked to accept the ultimate divine intervention, conception without a human father. By the time the angel Gabriel would appear to her with this unprecedented news, her soul would already be accustomed to Allah's power operating beyond natural boundaries. The protection and preparation that Maryam received also included intellectual and spiritual education that far exceeded what was typically available to women in her society. Under Zakariya's tutelage, she gained deep knowledge of the scriptures, understanding not just their words but their inner meanings and spiritual applications. According to the scholars, this education enabled her to engage in theological dialogue with the angel Gabriel and to understand the cosmic significance of the role she was being asked to fulfill. Imam as-Suyuti describes Maryam's spiritual development as proceeding through distinct stages, each building upon the previous one. First came purification, the removal of spiritual obstacles and worldly attachments. Then came preparation, the development of knowledge, wisdom, and spiritual sensitivity. Finally came elevation, the raising of her spiritual station to a level where she could serve as a bridge between the human and divine realms. The scholars also note that Maryam's protection included shielding from the typical social pressures and expectations that might have diverted her from her spiritual development. While other young women of her age might have been focused on marriage prospects and social status, Maryam was protected from these distractions, allowing her to concentrate entirely on her relationship with Allah and her preparation for the extraordinary role that awaited her. According to Imam al-Ghazali, this comprehensive protection and preparation reveals important principles about how Allah prepares His chosen servants for significant responsibilities. The protection isn't merely about preventing harm, but about creating optimal conditions for spiritual growth. The preparation isn't just about acquiring knowledge, but about developing the spiritual capacity to fulfill extraordinary roles in Allah's plan. The daily rhythm of Maryam's protected life also established patterns that would serve her well during the trials ahead. Her habit of seeking solitude for worship would enable her to withdraw from her people when her pregnancy became apparent. Her practice of relying on Allah's direct provision would sustain her during the isolation of childbirth. Her experience of accepting miraculous interventions would prepare her to trust Allah's plan even when it seemed impossible to human understanding. Perhaps most importantly, the protection and preparation that Maryam received demonstrates Allah's method of honoring those who are dedicated to His service. Because Hannah had offered her daughter entirely to Allah's service, Allah took complete responsibility for that daughter's development, providing protection, guidance, and preparation that exceeded anything human effort could have accomplished. The scholars emphasize that Maryam's early protection and preparation serve as an inspiration for all believers about the care that Allah provides for those who sincerely dedicate themselves to His service. While not everyone will experience miraculous provisions or supernatural protection, all who genuinely seek closeness to Allah can trust that He will provide the guidance, protection, and preparation necessary for the roles He has planned for them. As we witness the careful protection and meticulous preparation that surrounded Maryam's early years, we see Allah's infinite wisdom in readying a human soul for the most extraordinary mission in history. Every aspect of her protected environment, every element of her spiritual education, every miraculous provision she received was part of a divine curriculum designed to prepare her for the moment when she would be asked to trust Allah beyond all human understanding and accept a role that would impact all of humanity until the end of time. The environment in which Maryam developed her extraordinary faith was unlike anything experienced by any other human being in history. Under the direct supervision of Prophet Zakariya and within the sacred confines of her mihrab, she received what the scholars describe as a divine education, a comprehensive preparation of mind, heart, and soul that would enable her to fulfill the most remarkable mission ever entrusted to a human being. Understanding this formative environment helps us appreciate both the depth of her preparation and the magnitude of the trust Allah placed in her. The mihrab where Maryam spent her days was more than just a prayer chamber. It was a spiritual laboratory where her soul was refined and elevated through constant communion with Allah. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, this sacred space was carefully designed to facilitate the deepest forms of worship and contemplation. Located within the temple complex but separate from the areas where ordinary worship took place, it provided Maryam with the solitude necessary for the intimate relationship with Allah that would define her entire life. The scholars describe Maryam's daily routine within this environment as a perfect balance of structured worship and spontaneous devotion. According to At-Tabari's detailed commentary, her days began before dawn with lengthy prayers and recitation of the revealed scriptures. This wasn't mere ritual observance but what the mystics call worship of the heart, prayer that emerges from genuine love and longing for Allah rather than mere obligation. Imam al-Qurtubi emphasizes that Maryam's education transcended the typical religious instruction of her time. While other students might have focused primarily on memorizing texts and learning ritual procedures, Maryam's education under Zakariya's guidance penetrated to the deepest levels of spiritual understanding. She learned not just what to believe but how to experience the reality of belief. She discovered not just how to worship but how to live in constant awareness of Allah's presence. The miraculous provisions that regularly appeared in her chamber served as practical lessons in what the scholars call divine pedagogy. Allah's method of teaching through direct experience rather than mere instruction. According to Ibn Abbas, these provisions appeared in response to Maryam's states of spiritual elevation. When her worship reached particular depths of sincerity and devotion, Allah would respond with tangible signs of His care and pleasure. Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab explains that these miraculous provisions served multiple educational purposes. They demonstrated Allah's power to provide sustenance beyond natural means, preparing Maryam to accept the ultimate provision, life created without natural causation. They taught her to recognize and rely upon divine intervention as a normal aspect of her relationship with Allah. Most importantly, they established a pattern of immediate divine response to sincere devotion that would sustain her through the trials ahead. The environment of continuous miraculous intervention also shaped Maryam's understanding of what was possible through Allah's power. According to Imam al-Razi, by the time she reached adolescence, Maryam's worldview had been fundamentally formed by regular experiences of the supernatural. Where others might see the impossible, she saw simply another expression of Allah's limitless ability. This conditioning would prove essential when she would later be asked to accept the most impossible thing of all, virgin conception. Zakariya's role in this formative environment extended far beyond that of a typical guardian or teacher. According to the classical commentators, he served as what Islamic spirituality calls a spiritual guide. Maryam, someone who not only imparts knowledge but also helps shape the soul's capacity to receive divine grace. His own deep relationship with Allah created an atmosphere where Maryam could develop similar intimacy with her Creator. The scholars note that Zakariya's teaching method was particularly suited to Maryam's extraordinary spiritual potential. Rather than overwhelming her with complex theological concepts, he guided her toward direct experiential knowledge of Allah's attributes. According to Imam al-Ghazali, this experiential approach to divine knowledge would later enable Maryam to recognize the angel Gabriel, despite never having seen an angel before, and to understand the cosmic significance of her mission despite its unprecedented nature. The formative environment also included exposure to the broader community of faith while maintaining necessary spiritual protection. According to historical accounts preserved by the early commentators, Maryam would occasionally interact with other devout women who served in the temple, learning from their examples while maintaining the special status that set her apart. This limited social interaction provided her with models of female piety while preserving the unique spiritual development that her mission required. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah emphasizes that the environment created for Maryam represents the ideal conditions for spiritual development: protection from corrupting influences, guidance from qualified teachers, regular spiritual practices, exposure to divine manifestations, and gradual preparation for increasing levels of spiritual responsibility. This comprehensive approach to spiritual education created in Maryam a soul capable of receiving and fulfilling the most extraordinary divine mission. The psychological aspects of this formative environment were equally important. According to modern Islamic scholars who have studied classical commentaries, Maryam's upbringing created what psychologists might call spiritual resilience, the ability to maintain faith and trust in Allah, even under the most challenging circumstances. The regular experience of miraculous provisions built her confidence in Allah's care, while the atmosphere of constant worship developed her ability to find strength through spiritual connection. The scholars also point out that this environment established in Maryam a profound sense of her own purpose and value. Unlike many women of her time who might have defined themselves primarily through relationships with men, Maryam developed a strong sense of identity rooted in her direct relationship with Allah. This spiritual self-sufficiency would prove crucial when she would later face accusations and isolation related to her miraculous pregnancy. The intellectual aspects of Maryam's education were equally remarkable. According to the commentators, her studies under Zakariya included not only the scriptures revealed to previous prophets, but also deep understanding of Allah's attributes, His methods of guidance, and His patterns of intervention in human history. This comprehensive theological education enabled her to understand the significance of her own role within the broader context of divine guidance to humanity. Perhaps most importantly, the formative environment created for Maryam established what the scholars call spiritual precedent, a pattern of divine care and intervention that would reassure her during the most difficult moments of her mission. When she would later face the pain of childbirth in isolation, she could remember Allah's faithful provision in her chamber. When she would face accusations from her people, she could recall His consistent protection throughout her life. The environment also prepared Maryam for the unique form of worship that her mission would require. According to Imam as-Suyuti, traditional worship involves seeking closeness to Allah through prescribed actions and prayers. But Maryam's mission would require her to become a living expression of Allah's power, to embody His miracle rather than simply perform His rituals. The formative environment, with its constant miraculous interventions and intimate spiritual experiences, prepared her soul for this unprecedented form of divine service. As we consider the remarkable environment in which Maryam's faith was formed, we see Allah's meticulous care in preparing His chosen servant for the most extraordinary role in human history. Every aspect of her education, every element of her environment, every miraculous provision she received was part of a divine curriculum designed to create a soul capable of trusting Allah beyond all human understanding and accepting a mission that would illuminate the path of guidance for all humanity until the end of time. The miraculous provisions that regularly appeared in Maryam's chamber represent one of the most remarkable sustained miracles recorded in religious history. These weren't isolated supernatural events, but a continuous demonstration of Allah's special care that served both as preparation for greater miracles to come, and as evidence of the extraordinary destiny that awaited this young woman. The detailed examination of these provisions reveals profound insights into Allah's methods of nurturing His chosen servants and preparing them for unprecedented responsibilities. The Qur'an describes these miraculous provisions with elegant simplicity. Every time Zakariya entered upon her in the prayer chamber, he found with her provision. However, the classical commentators provide us with much more detailed accounts of what Zakariya discovered. According to Ibn Abbas, these provisions often included fruits that were completely out of season minus fresh grapes in winter, ripe dates in spring, and delicate fruits that couldn't be cultivated in their region at any time of year. Imam at-Tabari adds remarkable details about the nature of these provisions. They weren't simply unusual foods, but substances of exceptional quality and beauty. The fruits were perfectly formed, the colors more vibrant than anything found in nature, and the taste described by some accounts as beyond earthly comparison. These provisions appeared not just to sustain Maryam physically, but to remind her constantly of Allah's limitless power and His special attention to her needs. The timing of these miraculous appearances was equally significant. According to Al-Katubi, the provisions didn't appear randomly, but seemed to correspond with Maryam's spiritual states. During periods of intense worship and devotion, the provisions would be particularly abundant and extraordinary. This correlation taught Maryam a crucial lesson about the relationship between spiritual dedication and divine response, a lesson that would sustain her through the trials ahead. Zakariya's consistent discovery of these provisions and his repeated questioning about their source served an important purpose in the divine plan. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, Allah could have provided these sustaining gifts without Zakariya's knowledge, but He chose to make them visible to ensure that this miracle would be witnessed and its significance understood. Zakariya's amazement at these provisions prepared him to accept the even greater miracle that would later occur in his own life: the birth of his son Yahya. Despite his advanced age, Maryam's response to Zakariya's questions reveals the profound spiritual maturity that was developing within her. Her consistent answer, "It is from Allah. Indeed, Allah provides for whom He wills without account," demonstrates several remarkable qualities. According to Imam at-Razi, her response shows complete certainty about Allah's power, absolute trust in His care, and sophisticated theological understanding of His unlimited ability to transcend natural limitations. The phrase "without account," miracle bigay hisab, carries particular significance in Islamic theology. According to the linguistic analysis of classical scholars, this expression indicates that Allah's provision is not bound by earthly calculations or limitations. He doesn't need to consider availability, season, geography, or any other natural constraints when He chooses to provide for His servants. This understanding would prove crucial when Maryam would later need to accept the ultimate provision without natural cause: life created without a father. The scholars also note that these provisions served as a form of divine communication. According to Imam al-Ghazali, each miraculous appearance was like a message from Allah, reassuring Maryam of His constant presence and care. In a world where people often feel abandoned during difficult circumstances, Allah was establishing in Maryam's heart an unshakable confidence that He would never leave her to face any trial alone. The educational aspect of these miracles cannot be overstated. According to Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin, Allah was gradually expanding Maryam's understanding of what was possible through His power. Each provision that appeared without natural source prepared her soul to accept increasingly extraordinary manifestations of divine intervention. By the time Gabriel would appear to announce her miraculous conception, her mind and heart would already be conditioned to accept Allah's power operating beyond all natural limitations. The provisions also had a practical dimension that prepared Maryam for the isolation she would later experience. According to the commentators, these miraculous gifts taught her to rely directly on Allah for sustenance rather than depending on human provision or social support systems. This independence would prove essential when she would need to withdraw from her people during her pregnancy and childbirth. The impact of witnessing these miracles on Zakariya's own spiritual development represents another crucial aspect of their significance. According to authentic hadith narrations, seeing Allah's direct provision for Maryam inspired Zakariya to make his own prayer for a child, despite the apparent impossibility of his elderly wife conceiving. The miracles surrounding Maryam served as a catalyst for his own spiritual breakthrough and the subsequent miraculous birth of Yahya. The scholars emphasize that these provisions also established important theological principles about Allah's methods of caring for his chosen servants. According to Imam as-Suyuti, when someone is sincerely dedicated to Allah's service, he takes direct responsibility for their needs, often providing in ways that transcend normal means. This principle would be demonstrated again and again throughout Maryam's life, reaching its culmination in the virgin birth itself. The consistency of these miraculous provisions over time also reveals Allah's reliability in caring for those He has chosen. According to the commentators, these provisions appeared not just occasionally during moments of special need, but regularly throughout Maryam's development. This consistency built her confidence that Allah's care wasn't dependent on circumstances or her own worthiness, but flowed from His eternal decision to honor and protect her. Perhaps most importantly, these provisions prepared Maryam for the ultimate test of accepting Allah's plan even when it defied all human understanding. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, each miraculous provision was like a training exercise in trusting Allah beyond the boundaries of natural possibility. By the time she would be asked to accept virgin conception, her soul would already be accustomed to Allah accomplishing the impossible. The miraculous provisions in Maryam's chamber remind us that Allah's care for His servants often manifests in ways that transcend natural limitations. They demonstrate His infinite power, His intimate awareness of our needs, and His willingness to intervene directly in the lives of those who dedicate themselves completely to His service. Most importantly, they show us that when Allah prepares someone for an extraordinary mission, He provides not just the spiritual resources necessary for that mission, but also the experiential foundation needed to trust His plan even when it surpasses all human understanding. Maryam's approach to worship represented something far beyond the conventional religious practices of her time. While others might have viewed worship as a series of scheduled activities or ritual obligations, Maryam embodied what the Islamic mystics call worship of being, a state where every breath, every moment, every aspect of existence becomes an act of devotion to Allah. Understanding this comprehensive approach to worship helps us appreciate both the depth of her spiritual development and the foundation it provided for the miraculous events that would unfold. According to the classical commentators, Maryam's days were structured around what Imam al-Ghazali describes as the rhythm of remembrance. She would begin each day before dawn with extended prayers that weren't mere recitation of prescribed formulas, but intimate conversations with Allah that emerged from genuine love and longing. These prayers, according to Ibn Kathir, often extended for hours, during which she would pour out her heart to her Creator with a sincerity that transformed the act of prayer from obligation into spiritual nourishment. The Qur'an tells us that Maryam was of the devoutly obedient, using the Arabic term qanitin, which carries profound implications beyond simple compliance with religious requirements. According to the linguistic analysis of Imam Raghib al-Isfahani, this term describes someone whose obedience flows from perfect love and trust rather than mere duty. Maryam's worship wasn't motivated by fear of punishment or hope for reward, but by genuine recognition of Allah's worthiness of worship and her natural response of love and gratitude. Her devotional lifestyle also included what the scholars describe as continuous dhikr, the constant remembrance of Allah that permeated every aspect of her daily existence. According to At-Tabari, even when she wasn't engaged in formal prayer, her heart remained focused on Allah through internal recitation of His names and attributes. This practice created what Islamic spirituality calls presence, a state of constant awareness of Allah's nearness that transforms ordinary activities into acts of worship. The physical aspects of Maryam's devotional practice were equally remarkable. According to the commentators, she would spend long periods in prostration, not just during prescribed prayer times but whenever her heart was moved to express gratitude or seek Allah's guidance. These extended prostrations weren't displays of religious extremism, but natural expressions of a soul that found joy and peace in direct communion with its Creator. Imam Ibn Uthaymin emphasizes that Maryam's worship was characterized by what he calls integrated spirituality, the seamless blending of formal religious practices with everyday consciousness of Allah. When she ate the miraculous provisions that appeared in her chamber, she did so with awareness that each bite was a gift from Allah. When she studied the scriptures under Zakariya's guidance, she approached the texts not just as academic material, but as direct communication from her beloved Creator. The scholars also note that Maryam's devotional lifestyle included periods of deliberate isolation for spiritual contemplation. The Qur'an mentions her withdrawal to a place toward the east, which according to classical interpretations represented her regular practice of seeking solitude for deeper communion with Allah. These retreats weren't escapes from religious duty, but intensive periods of spiritual development that recharged her faith and strengthened her connection with Allah. According to Imam al-Qurtubi, Maryam's approach to worship also included what the mystics call worship of the heart, internal states of love, awe, gratitude and trust that accompanied and often surpassed her external religious actions. Her heart was constantly engaged in what the Qur'an calls dhikr Allah, the remembrance of Allah that purifies the soul and brings peace to the believer. The impact of this comprehensive devotional lifestyle on Maryam's character was profound. According to the commentators, her constant worship created in her what Islamic psychology calls spiritual transparency, a state where the ego's demands and worldly concerns become so diminished that the soul reflects Allah's qualities like a clear mirror. This spiritual transparency would later enable her to receive Gabriel's visit without being overwhelmed by fear and to accept the miraculous conception with trust rather than doubt. Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab points out that Maryam's devotional lifestyle also prepared her for the unique form of worship that her mission would require. While most people worship Allah through prescribed actions and prayers, Maryam's mission would require her to become a living sign of Allah's power. Her years of comprehensive worship prepared her soul to serve as a vessel for divine manifestation rather than simply a performer of religious rituals. The scholars emphasize that Maryam's worship was also characterized by perfect sincerity, what Islamic theology calls ikhlas. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, her devotional practices weren't motivated by desire for recognition, social status, or even personal spiritual achievement. They flowed from pure love for Allah and natural recognition of His right to be worshipped. This sincerity would later enable her to maintain her faith even when her devotion to Allah led to social isolation and public accusation. The educational aspect of Maryam's devotional lifestyle was equally important. According to the commentators, her years of intensive worship taught her to distinguish between genuine spiritual experiences and emotional states that might be mistaken for divine guidance. This discernment would prove crucial when Gabriel appeared to her, enabling her to recognize immediately that this was a true messenger from Allah, rather than a deceptive apparition. Maryam's devotional practices also included what the scholars describe as anticipatory worship, devotional acts performed in preparation for whatever service Allah might require of her. According to Imam as-Suyuti, she understood that her dedication to Allah's service might eventually require sacrifices and challenges that she couldn't yet imagine. Her comprehensive worship was partly preparation for unknown trials ahead. The psychological effects of Maryam's devotional lifestyle created what modern Islamic scholars call spiritual resilience, the ability to maintain faith and trust in Allah even under extreme pressure. According to the commentators, her years of finding joy and strength through worship created neural pathways and spiritual habits that would sustain her through the isolation of pregnancy, the pain of childbirth, and the accusations of her people. Perhaps most importantly, Maryam's devotional lifestyle established her identity as a servant of Allah rather than as someone defined by social roles or expectations. According to Imam al-Ghazali, while other women of her time might have defined themselves primarily through relationships with family members or potential husbands, Maryam's sense of self was rooted entirely in her relationship with Allah. This spiritual independence would prove essential when her mission would require her to stand alone against social pressure and misunderstanding. The comprehensive nature of Maryam's devotional lifestyle reminds us that true worship involves far more than scheduled religious activities. It encompasses the orientation of the entire being toward Allah, heart, mind, body, and soul working together in constant recognition of His presence and worthiness of worship. Through her example, we see that when worship becomes a way of life rather than merely a religious obligation, it transforms the worshipper into a vessel capable of receiving and manifesting Allah's greatest blessings. After years of spiritual preparation within the protective environment of her mihrab, the moment arrived that would transform not only Maryam's life but the entire course of human history. The Qur'an introduces this pivotal encounter with deceptive simplicity, and mention in the book the story of Maryam when she withdrew from her family to a place toward the east. Yet behind these simple words lies the most extraordinary meeting between the human and angelic realms ever recorded. According to the classical commentators, Maryam's withdrawal to the east was part of her regular spiritual practice. Imam Ibn Kathir explains that she would periodically leave even the sacred confines of her mihrab to seek complete solitude for deeper contemplation and worship. The direction toward the east held special significance according to the scholars, and it was the direction of light, hope, and divine illumination. When Maryam positioned herself facing east, she was symbolically opening her heart to receive whatever guidance Allah might send. The location of this encounter was carefully chosen by divine wisdom. According to At-Tabari, Maryam had withdrawn to a place where she could worship without any possibility of interruption or observation. This complete isolation served multiple purposes. It protected her privacy during the sacred encounter that was about to unfold. It ensured that the miraculous events would have a reliable witness in Maryam herself, and it demonstrated that Allah's most profound interventions often occur away from the crowds and public spaces where people typically expect to find Him. The Qur'an continues, "Then she took in seclusion from them a screen." The Arabic word hijab used here indicates that Maryam had created additional privacy beyond her physical isolation. According to Imam al-Qurtubi, this screen wasn't just physical but also represented her spiritual state, a complete turning away from all worldly concerns and human connections to focus entirely on her relationship with Allah. In this state of perfect spiritual isolation, she was prepared to receive the most extraordinary divine message in human history. Then we sent to her our angel, and he represented himself to her as a well-proportioned man. The appearance of Jibril in Arabic marked the moment when the invisible world intersected with human experience in the most dramatic way possible. According to the scholars, Gabriel appeared in human form rather than his natural angelic appearance out of mercy for Maryam. His true form, as described in other Quranic passages, involves 600 wings and such overwhelming majesty that even Prophet Muhammad was initially terrified by the sight. The description of Gabriel as a well-proportioned man carries deep significance according to the commentators. Imam al-Razi explains that Gabriel appeared in the most perfect human form imaginable, beautiful without being seductive, powerful without being threatening, and clearly supernatural despite his human appearance. This perfect form was designed to command respect and attention while minimizing the shock of angelic encounter. Maryam's immediate reaction reveals both her spiritual sensitivity and her moral character. She said, "Indeed, I seek refuge in the most merciful from you, if you should be fearing of Allah." Her response demonstrates several remarkable qualities according to the scholars. First, her immediate recognition that this was no ordinary human being. Something about Gabriel's appearance clearly indicated his supernatural nature. Second, her instinctive turn to Allah for protection rather than relying on human defenses or attempting to flee. Third, her appeal to the visitor's own consciousness of Allah, assuming that any being capable of appearing as Gabriel had appeared must have some relationship with the divine. The phrase, "if you should be fearing of Allah," represents what Islamic ethics calls moral reasoning. Maryam's assumption that anyone who possessed supernatural abilities must also possess moral consciousness. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, her response shows that she understood the connection between spiritual power and moral responsibility, expecting that any being capable of miraculous manifestation would also be accountable to Allah. Gabriel's response immediately reassured her. He said, "I am only the messenger of your Lord to give you news of a pure boy." The word messenger, Minas Rasul, is the same term used for prophets, indicating the supreme importance of the message Gabriel carried. According to the commentators, Gabriel was not merely delivering information, but serving as the direct agent of Allah's will in the most significant divine intervention since the creation of Adam. The description of the promised child as pure, miraculous, carries multiple layers of meaning, according to the scholars. Imam Ibn Kathir explains that this purity encompasses physical, spiritual, and moral dimensions. The child would be born without sin, would remain free from spiritual corruption throughout his life, and would serve as a source of purification for others. This comprehensive purity was necessary for the role he would play as a sign of Allah's power and a guide for humanity. The scholarly consensus emphasizes that Gabriel's announcement was delivered with perfect timing and setting. According to Imam as-Suyuti, Allah chose this moment of Maryam's deepest spiritual retreat to deliver the most extraordinary news, ensuring that she would receive it in the optimal state of spiritual receptivity. Her years of preparation, her current state of worship, and her complete isolation from worldly distractions created the perfect conditions for accepting a message that would challenge every assumption about natural possibility. The encounter also demonstrates Allah's infinite wisdom in how He communicates with His chosen servants. According to the commentators, Allah could have simply caused the conception to occur without any advance notice, but He chose to prepare Maryam through Gabriel's visit. This preparation honored her intelligence and moral agency, allowing her to understand and consent to the role she was being asked to fulfill. The setting of this encounter, young woman alone in spiritual retreat, suddenly visited by an angel with the most impossible news imaginable, would become the foundation for everything that followed. In this moment of perfect solitude and divine intervention, the stage was set for the virgin birth that would serve as one of Allah's greatest signs to humanity and establish the mission of Prophet Isa that would guide countless souls to their Creator. Gabriel's announcement to Maryam represents the most extraordinary divine mission ever entrusted to a human being. When he declared, "I am only the messenger of your Lord to give you news of a pure boy," he was not merely informing her of a future event, but inviting her to participate in a miracle that would challenge the fundamental laws of nature and serve as an eternal sign of Allah's unlimited power. The depth of this announcement and Maryam's response reveals profound truths about divine communication, human agency, and the nature of miraculous intervention. The word pure, Allah's Sikiyain, young, that Gabriel used to describe the promised child carries extraordinary significance in Islamic theology. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, this term encompasses multiple dimensions of purity that would distinguish this child from every other human being. Physical purity from birth, spiritual purity throughout life, and moral purity in mission and message. The scholars emphasize that this comprehensive purity was necessary because this child would serve not merely as a prophet to his people, but as a sign of Allah's power for all humanity. Maryam's immediate response demonstrates both her human nature and her spiritual sophistication. She said, "How can I have a boy, while no man has touched me and I have not been unchaste?" Her question wasn't born of doubt about Allah's power, but of natural human curiosity about how the impossible could become possible. According to Imam al-Qurtubi, her response shows that she fully understood the biological realities of conception, while simultaneously remaining open to divine intervention beyond natural causation. The phrase "no man has touched me" reveals Miriam's complete chastity according to the commentators, while "I have not been unchaste" demonstrates her moral purity. Together, these statements establish both the impossibility of natural conception and the moral foundation that would make miraculous conception appropriate. According to the scholars, Allah chose to accomplish this miracle through someone whose purity was beyond question, ensuring that the supernatural nature of the event would be undeniable. Gabriel's response reveals the divine methodology behind miraculous intervention. He said, "Thus it will be, your Lord says, it is easy for me, and we will make him a sign for the people, and a mercy from us, and it is a matter already decreed." The phrase "it is easy for me," Maita wala yahayin, represents one of the most profound theological statements in the Qur'an about Allah's relationship to natural laws and limitations. According to Imam Ar-Razi, this declaration reveals that what appears impossible to human understanding represents no difficulty whatsoever for Allah's infinite power. The laws of nature that seem absolute to human beings are merely patterns that Allah has established, and He who established them can transcend them whenever His wisdom requires. This principle would become fundamental to understanding not only Isa's virgin birth, but all miraculous events recorded in religious history. The announcement that this child would be a sign for the people, Mayatan Nas, establishes the cosmic significance of what Allah was about to accomplish through Maryam. According to the commentators, this wouldn't be a private miracle for Maryam's benefit, but a public demonstration of Allah's power, intended to guide humanity toward recognition of their Creator. The child himself would become a living proof of Allah's ability to accomplish anything He wills. The description of the child as a mercy from us, Rahmatan Minna, reveals another crucial dimension of this miraculous birth. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, this mercy would manifest through the child's teachings, his healing miracles, his moral guidance, and ultimately his role in preparing humanity for the final prophetic message. The virgin birth wasn't an isolated supernatural event, but the beginning of a comprehensive divine mercy that would benefit countless souls. The phrase "it is a matter already decreed," Morkanar Amram Mabdiyan, indicates that this miraculous conception was not a spontaneous divine decision, but part of Allah's eternal plan for human guidance. According to the scholars, this decree existed in Allah's knowledge before the creation of the world, waiting for the perfect time and the perfect vessel for its manifestation. Maryam's entire life had been preparation for this predetermined moment. The scholars emphasize that Gabriel's announcement respected Maryam's intelligence and moral agency. Rather than simply causing the conception to occur without explanation, Allah chose to inform her of what was about to happen and why. This approach honored her as a rational being capable of understanding and accepting her role in the divine plan, even when that role transcended all previous human experience. According to Imam as-Suyuti, the announcement also served to prepare Maryam psychologically for the trials that would follow. By explaining that her child would be a sign and mercy for humanity, Gabriel was helping her understand that the difficulties she would face, the accusations, the isolation, the social ostracism, were part of a greater purpose that would ultimately benefit all mankind. The divine mission entrusted to Maryam extended far beyond merely bearing a child. According to the commentators, She was being asked to serve as the human bridge between the natural and supernatural realms, to demonstrate through her own experience that Allah's power knows no limitations. Her acceptance of this mission would require not only physical courage to endure pregnancy and childbirth, but spiritual courage to maintain faith in Allah's plan despite social condemnation. The announcement also reveals Allah's method of honoring His most faithful servants. According to Imam al-Ghazali, Allah could have chosen any means to bring about this miraculous birth, but He selected Maryam specifically because her years of devotion and spiritual development had prepared her to fulfill this role with the faith and dignity it required. Her mission represented not burden but honor, the ultimate recognition of her spiritual worthiness. The scholars note that Gabriel's announcement established important principles about how Allah communicates extraordinary missions to His chosen servants. The message came through a trusted messenger, was delivered with respect for human intelligence, explained the purpose behind the mission, and assured the recipient of divine support. These principles would guide prophetic communication throughout religious history. As Gabriel's words settled into Maryam's consciousness, she faced a choice that would echo through eternity. She could accept this impossible mission with trust in Allah's wisdom and power, or she could resist it out of fear of its consequences. Her response would determine not only her own destiny but the course of divine guidance for all humanity. In this moment of ultimate divine invitation, the stage was set for the most extraordinary act of human faith and divine power in recorded history. Following Gabriel's announcement, Maryam entered what the scholars describe as the most profound test of faith ever experienced by a human being. The Qur'an states simply, "So she conceived him, and she withdrew with him to a remote place." Yet behind this concise description lies a period of unprecedented spiritual, physical, and emotional trial that would test every aspect of the faith and character that had been developing within her throughout her life. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, the conception occurred through Gabriel's breath, Nam Fakhna Fahi Min Ruina, Morris representing the most direct divine intervention in human biology ever recorded. This wasn't a gradual process but an immediate manifestation of Allah's creative command, be, and it is. The scholars emphasize that this moment marked the intersection of divine will with human reality in a way that had never occurred before and would never occur again. Maryam's immediate withdrawal to a remote place reveals her profound wisdom and spiritual sensitivity. According to at-Tabari, she understood instinctively that what was happening to her transcended normal human experience and required complete isolation from the judgments and misunderstandings of society. This withdrawal wasn't motivated by shame or fear, but by recognition that this sacred process required protection from worldly interference. The location of her retreat holds deep significance according to the commentators. Imam al-Qurtubi describes it as a place far from human habitation, where she could experience the unfolding miracle without distraction or intrusion. This physical isolation also represented spiritual isolation, a complete separation from all human support systems that would force her to rely entirely on Allah's care and guidance. During this period of sacred solitude, Maryam experienced what the scholars describe as a unique form of worship through suffering. According to Imam al-Ghazali, while her previous worship had been characterized by joy and spiritual elevation, now she was called to worship through endurance, patience, and unwavering trust despite unprecedented challenges. This transition represented the highest form of spiritual development, maintaining faith not only when Allah's blessings are evident, but when His plan involves trials that surpass human understanding. The physical aspects of her pregnancy, carrying a child conceived without natural causation, represented challenges that no medical knowledge could address or social support could ease. According to the commentators, Maryam's body was experiencing the biological reality of pregnancy while her mind grappled with the supernatural nature of the conception. This combination of natural process and miraculous cause created a unique form of trial that required both physical endurance and spiritual strength. The scholars emphasize that during this period, Maryam's previous experiences of miraculous provisions and divine care became crucial sources of strength. According to Ibn Abbas, her years of witnessing Allah's direct intervention in her life through the provisions in her mirab had prepared her psychological and spiritual foundation to trust His care even in this unprecedented situation. Every miraculous fruit that had appeared in her chamber became a reminder that Allah provides for His servants in ways that transcend natural limitations. The isolation also served as preparation for the even greater trials that would follow. According to Imam as-Suyuti, Allah was gradually building Maryam's capacity to stand alone against social pressure and misunderstanding. Each day of solitude strengthened her reliance on Allah's support rather than human approval, preparing her for the moment when she would face her people's accusations with only her faith as protection. The scholarly consensus suggests that during this period of withdrawal, Maryam experienced what the mystics call spiritual pregnancy alongside her physical pregnancy. According to Imam Ibn Arabi, just as her body was developing the physical form of Isa, her soul was developing the spiritual capacity to serve as the mother of a prophet. This dual development, physical and spiritual mouths, required the complete focus that only isolation could provide. The trial of carrying a child whose conception defied natural law also represented a test of Maryam's trust in Allah's wisdom. According to the commentators, she had to maintain faith not only in Allah's power to accomplish the impossible, but in His justice in asking her to bear the social consequences of a miracle that others would not understand. This required a level of trust that transcended even the remarkable faith she had previously demonstrated. The period of sacred solitude also established important principles about how Allah's chosen servants experience their most significant trials. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Allah often isolates His servants during their greatest tests, not out of abandonment, but to create the conditions where they can develop complete reliance on Him without the interference of human opinions or support systems that might compromise their spiritual development. As Maryam's pregnancy progressed in this remote location, she was being prepared not only for the physical reality of giving birth, but for the moment when she would return to society carrying the most extraordinary child in human history. Every day of solitude was building her spiritual strength for the confrontation with disbelief, the defense of her honor, and the presentation of Allah's greatest sign to a world that would struggle to comprehend what they were witnessing. The period of trial and sacred solitude reminds us that Allah's greatest gifts often come through paths that initially appear as hardships. Maryam's isolation, while difficult, was actually Allah's mercy providing her with the protection and preparation necessary for the miraculous birth that would serve as guidance for all humanity until the end of time. As the time of delivery approached, Maryam faced what the Qur'an describes as one of the most intense moments of human despair ever recorded. The divine narrative captures her anguish with profound honesty, and the pains of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She said, "Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten." These words reveal the depth of her human vulnerability at the moment when divine destiny was about to manifest through the most difficult physical and emotional trial of her life. The scholars emphasize that Maryam's cry of despair wasn't a rejection of Allah's plan or a failure of faith, but rather the natural human response to overwhelming circumstances. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, her words reflect the intersection of physical pain with the psychological weight of what awaited her after the birth. She wasn't only experiencing the agony of childbirth, but the terrifying prospect of returning to her people with a child whose conception they could never understand or accept. The phrase "I wish I had died before this" reveals the magnitude of her distress according to the commentators. Imam al-Qurtubi explains that Maryam wasn't expressing a death wish born of despair, but rather the natural human desire to escape an impossible situation. Her words represent what Islamic psychology recognizes as the soul's instinctive response when faced with trials that exceed its perceived capacity to endure. The location of this crisis at the trunk of a palm tree holds deep symbolic significance according to the scholars. Trees in Islamic symbolism often represent life, sustenance and divine provision. According to at-Tabari, Allah guided Maryam to this specific location not randomly, but as part of His plan to provide comfort and sustenance at her moment of greatest need. The palm tree would soon become an instrument of divine mercy, but Allah's response to Maryam's crisis demonstrates His infinite compassion for His servants in their moments of greatest weakness. The Qur'an continues, "But He called her from below her, 'Do not grieve. Your Lord has provided beneath you a stream.'" The scholars debate whether He refers to the angel Gabriel or to the newborn Isa himself, but the essential message remains the same. Mine's divine comfort arrived precisely when human endurance had reached its limit. The stream that Allah provided represents more than mere physical refreshment according to the commentators. Imam al-Razi explains that this miraculous water served multiple purposes. It quenched her physical thirst, symbolized the flow of divine mercy, and reminded her that Allah's provision appears precisely when natural resources are exhausted. The stream emerging from barren ground paralleled her own situation, life and blessing flowing from what appeared impossible. The divine instruction continued, "And shake toward yourself the trunk of the palm tree, it will drop upon you ripe fresh dates." This command reveals profound wisdom about the relationship between human effort and divine provision. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Allah could have simply caused the dates to fall without Maryam's action, but He chose to require her participation to teach an essential spiritual principle. Divine blessings often require human effort, even when that effort seems insufficient for the desired result. The act of shaking a palm tree trunk would normally require significant strength, yet Maryam in her weakened state was commanded to attempt this task. According to the scholars, this wasn't a test of her physical capability, but rather a lesson in trusting Allah's support. When human strength combines with divine assistance, the impossible becomes possible. The dates that fell represented not just nourishment for her body, but encouragement for her soul. The scholars note that these provisions, water and dates, were specifically chosen for their symbolic and practical significance. Water represents life, purity, and divine mercy, while dates provide immediate energy and long-term nourishment. According to medical knowledge available to classical commentators, dates were considered ideal food for women after childbirth, providing essential nutrients for recovery and strength. The timing of this divine comfort reveals important principles about Allah's care for His servants. According to Imam as-Suyuti, Allah allowed Maryam to experience the full weight of her human limitations before providing supernatural relief. This patterned human extremity, followed by divine intervention, appears throughout the Qur'an and serves to highlight the contrast between human weakness and divine power. The comfort provided to Maryam also prepared her for the next phase of her trial. According to the commentators, the physical refreshment from the stream and dates was accompanied by spiritual strengthening that would enable her to face her people with confidence. The same Allah who provided water from barren ground and dates from a shaken tree would provide the words and wisdom needed to confront social condemnation. The final instruction given to Maryam reveals Allah's wisdom in protecting His servants from unnecessary confrontation. So eat and drink, and be comforted. And if you see from among humanity anyone say, "Indeed I have vowed to the most merciful abstinence, so I will not speak today to anyone," this vow of silence would protect her from having to defend or explain what no human words could adequately describe. According to Imam al-Qurtubi, this divine instruction served multiple purposes. It protected Maryam from the futile attempt to convince skeptics through human argumentation, preserved her energy for the greater revelation that was to come, and created the conditions where the speaking infant would serve as the ultimate defense of his mother's honor. The silence imposed on the mother would make the speech of the child even more miraculous and convincing. The birth crisis and divine comfort demonstrate that Allah's greatest servants are not immune from human weakness and despair, but they are never abandoned in their moments of greatest need. Maryam's experience reminds us that divine missions often involve human suffering, but that suffering is always accompanied by divine support that exceeds our natural capacity to endure. In her moment of complete vulnerability, Allah's mercy flowed like a stream, providing exactly what was needed for the next phase of His eternal plan. After giving birth to Asa and receiving divine comfort through the miraculous provisions, Maryam faced what scholars consider the ultimate test of faith, returning to face her people while carrying a child whose conception they could never understand. The Qur'an describes this pivotal moment. Then she brought him to her people carrying him. They said, "O Mary, you have certainly done a thing unprecedented." This confrontation would test not only Maryam's faith, but also serve as the stage for one of the greatest miracles in human history. The scholars emphasize that Maryam's decision to return to her people, despite knowing the accusations she would face, demonstrates extraordinary courage rooted in complete trust in Allah's plan. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, she could have remained in isolation indefinitely, but her mission required her to present Allah's sign to humanity. Her return wasn't motivated by personal desire for vindication, but by obedience to her role in Allah's greater purpose. The reaction of her people reveals the depth of their shock and incomprehension. The word unprecedented mimics something that had never occurred before in their collective memory or understanding. According to At-Tabari, their accusation wasn't merely about perceived moral transgression, but about the complete impossibility of what they were witnessing. A woman known for unparalleled piety and chastity, suddenly appearing with an infant challenged their entire worldview. Their words continued with even harsher accusations. "O sister of Aaron, your father was not a man of evil, nor was your mother unchaste." The reference to sister of Aaron has been interpreted by scholars in multiple ways. According to Ibn Abbas, this either refers to her genealogical connection to the priestly line of Aaron, or represents their way of saying, "O you who come from such a righteous family." Either interpretation emphasizes their shock that someone from such noble lineage could apparently engage in such behavior. The mention of her parents' righteousness served to intensify their accusation according to the commentators. Imam al-Qurtubi explains that they were essentially saying, how could someone raised by such pious parents, someone who spent her life in worship and devotion, suddenly commit such an act? Their words reveal not just moral condemnation but complete bewilderment at the apparent contradiction between her known character and her current situation. The psychological pressure of this confrontation was immense according to the scholars. Maryam stood alone before her community, holding an infant whose very existence seemed to contradict everything they knew about her. She had no human witness to the angelic visitation, no conventional explanation for the conception, and no precedent in human experience to which she could appeal. Her only defense was her faith in Allah's plan and His promise to vindicate her. But Maryam's response to these accusations demonstrates the wisdom of divine guidance. Rather than attempting to defend herself through human argumentation, she followed Allah's instruction perfectly, but she pointed to Him. This simple gesture, according to the commentators, redirected their attention from accusation to revelation. Instead of trying to convince them with words they wouldn't believe, she let Allah's miracle speak for itself. The people's reaction to her gesture reveals their continued incomprehension. They said, "How can we speak to one who is in the cradle, a child?" Their response shows that they completely missed the significance of her action. According to Imam al-Razi, they interpreted her pointing as either mockery of their serious accusations or the desperate gesture of someone with no rational defense. They couldn't conceive that she was actually directing them to their answer. The scholarly consensus emphasizes that this moment of maximum human skepticism and divine silence created the perfect conditions for the miracle that would follow. According to Imam as-Suyuti, Allah often allows human opposition to reach its peak before revealing His power, ensuring that when the miracle occurs it cannot be attributed to human manipulation or coincidence. The confrontation also reveals important principles about how truth confronts falsehood in human society. According to the commentators, Maryam's accusers were convinced of their moral superiority and rational understanding. They had evaluated the evidence according to their limited knowledge and reached what seemed like the only logical conclusion, yet their certainty about impossibility was about to be shattered by divine intervention. The public nature of this confrontation was crucial to Allah's plan according to the scholars. Had Isa's first miracle occurred in private, skeptics could have dismissed it as fabrication or delusion. But with multiple witnesses present, all expecting Maryam to provide some defense for her apparent transgression, the stage was perfectly set for a demonstration of divine power that no one could deny or explain away. The silence that preceded the miracle also heightened its impact according to the commentators. According to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, the longer human accusation continued without divine response, the more dramatic the eventual intervention would appear. Allah was allowing human pride and certainty to fully manifest before revealing the limitations of human understanding. Maryam's calm confidence during this trial demonstrates the strength that comes from complete trust in Allah's plan. According to the scholars, despite facing the most serious accusations possible in her society, she remained composed because she knew that Allah would vindicate her truth in His own perfect timing. Her faith had been tested through pregnancy and childbirth. Now it was being tested through social condemnation. The confrontation with her people represents the culmination of all the spiritual preparation Maryam had received throughout her life. Every miraculous provision in her chamber, every moment of divine protection, every experience of Allah's intervention had prepared her for this moment when she would need to trust Him completely while facing human judgment. The public test would soon become public vindication as the infant she carried prepared to speak words that would silence all accusation and establish the truth of Allah's unlimited power. At the moment when human accusation reached its peak and Maryam's silence seemed to confirm her guilt in the eyes of her people, Allah manifested one of the greatest miracles in human history. The infant, Isa, peace be upon him, spoke from his cradle with words that would forever change human understanding of divine power and establish his mother's innocence beyond all doubt. The Qur'an records his first words, "Indeed, I am the servant of Allah. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet." The impact of these words on the assembled crowd was beyond human comprehension according to the scholars. Imam Ibn Kathir describes their shock as total minus and not merely surprise at hearing an infant speak, but complete transformation of their understanding of reality itself. In Islamic tradition, no human being had ever spoken coherent words from infancy, making this intervention absolutely unprecedented and undeniably miraculous. The content of Isa's first declaration reveals profound theological significance according to the commentators. He began not by defending his mother, though that defense was implicit in his speech, but by establishing his relationship with Allah. The phrase "I am the servant of Allah," Inni Abdallah, immediately clarified the nature of his extraordinary birth. According to Imam al-Razi, this opening declaration prevented any possible misunderstanding about his divine origins while establishing his complete submission to Allah's will. The announcement that Allah had given him the scripture indicates that his prophetic mission was already determined and his qualifications already established. According to at-Tabari, this wasn't merely a prediction of future authority, but a declaration of present spiritual reality. Even as an infant, Isa possessed the divine knowledge and guidance that would characterize his prophetic ministry. His declaration "and made me a prophet," Jalni Nabiyan, is established his mission from the very moment of his speech. According to the scholars, this represented an unprecedented form of prophetic calling. While other prophets received their missions at various stages of maturity, Isa's prophethood was announced by himself as his first words to humanity. This immediate establishment of prophetic authority served to explain and justify the miraculous circumstances of his conception and birth. The infant continued, "And he has made me blessed wherever I am and has enjoined upon me prayer and zakah as long as I remain alive." These words reveal the comprehensive nature of his mission according to the commentators. The blessing mentioned wasn't personal privilege but divine empowerment to serve as a source of guidance and benefit to others. According to Imam al-Qutubi, this blessing would manifest through his teachings, healings, and spiritual guidance throughout his life. The mention of prayer and zakah indicates that his mission would follow the established patterns of divine guidance according to the scholars. Despite the extraordinary circumstances of his birth, his message would center on the fundamental principles that connect all prophetic missions: worship of Allah and care for creation. According to Ibn Abbas, this immediately situated his mission within the broader context of divine guidance rather than presenting it as an isolated supernatural event. His final words provided the ultimate vindication of his mother, and made me dutiful to my mother, and has not made me a wretched tyrant. And peace is on me the day I was born, and the day I will die, and the day I am raised alive. The emphasis on being dutiful to his mother served as the most powerful possible defense of Maryam's honor. According to the scholars, no child born of illegitimate conception could possess such divine blessing and prophetic authority. The declaration of peace upon himself, the day I was born, and the day I will die, and the day I am raised alive, established his protected status throughout his earthly mission and beyond. According to Imam as-Suyuti, this threefold blessing paralleled the protection that had been granted to Maryam herself, indicating that both mother and son were under special divine care that would preserve them from spiritual corruption and grant them eternal honor. The immediate effect of this miraculous speech on Maryam's accusers was complete vindication of her innocence and transformation of their understanding. According to the commentators, those who moments before had been certain of her transgression now witnessed undeniable proof of divine intervention. The infant's eloquent declaration of prophethood made clear that his conception had been a miracle of Allah rather than any human sin. The broader significance of this vindication extends far beyond clearing Maryam's reputation according to the scholars. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah explains that Allah chose this dramatic method of defense to establish important principles about how He protects His chosen servants and validates their truthfulness. When human understanding proves inadequate to recognize divine intervention, Allah provides evidence that transcends all human capacity to deny or explain away. The miraculous speech also served to establish his credibility for his future mission according to the commentators. According to Imam al-Ghazali, this first miracle created a foundation of undeniable supernatural authority that would support all his subsequent teachings and miracles. Those who witnessed his infant speech could never doubt his divine commission or question his spiritual authority. The scholars emphasize that this vindication represents the perfect fulfillment of Allah's promise to defend those who trust in His plan, despite social opposition. Maryam's silent faith during the confrontation was rewarded with a defense more powerful than any human argumentation could have provided. Her trust in Allah's timing was vindicated by an intervention that transformed accusation into amazement and doubt into certainty. The miraculous vindication also established important precedents about how Allah responds to accusations against His chosen servants. According to the commentators, when those dedicated to Allah's service face false charges that human defense cannot adequately address, Allah Himself provides vindication that silences all opposition and establishes truth beyond question. As the infant's words echoed in the stunned silence of his audience, the impossible had become undeniable reality. Maryam's honor was restored, Isa's mission was established, and Allah's power was demonstrated in a way that would be remembered and recounted until the end of time. The miraculous vindication transformed a moment of ultimate trial into eternal testimony of divine truth and the protection Allah provides for those who trust completely in His plan. The story of Maryam as revealed in Surah Maryam represents far more than a historical account of miraculous events. It stands as an eternal testament to the transformative power of complete faith in Allah and the extraordinary blessings that flow from sincere devotion to His service. As we reflect on this remarkable narrative, we discover timeless lessons that speak directly to the hearts of believers across all generations and circumstances. Maryam's legacy in Islamic tradition extends beyond her role as the mother of Prophet Isa. According to the scholarly consensus, she represents the pinnacle of human spiritual achievement, a soul so purified and devoted that it became a suitable vessel for Allah's greatest miracle. Her story demonstrates that true nobility lies not in worldly status or social recognition, but in the depth of one's relationship with Allah and the sincerity of one's submission to His will. The Quranic portrayal of Maryam establishes her as a model for all believers regardless of gender or social position. According to Imam Ibn Kathir, her example teaches us that Allah's favor is earned through spiritual merit rather than inherited through lineage or achieved through worldly accomplishment. Her selection from among all the women of the world serves as eternal proof that Allah's choices are based on the qualities of the heart rather than external circumstances. The trials that Maryam endured in rest from the isolation of pregnancy to the accusations of her people reveal important truths about the nature of serving Allah's plan. According to the commentators, those chosen for significant roles in divine guidance often face tests that surpass ordinary human experience. Yet these trials are not punishments but preparations designed to purify the soul and strengthen its capacity to fulfill extraordinary missions. Her unwavering trust during moments of apparent impossibility provides crucial guidance for believers facing their own seemingly insurmountable challenges. According to Imam al-Ghazali, Maryam's story teaches us that when Allah decrees something, He provides not only the means for its accomplishment, but also the spiritual strength necessary to endure its challenges. Her faith during the virgin conception reminds us that Allah's plan often transcends human understanding but never exceeds divine wisdom. The miraculous provisions that sustained Maryam throughout her life establish important principles about Allah's care for His servants. According to the scholars, those who dedicate themselves completely to Allah's service can trust that He will provide for their needs in ways that often surpass natural limitations. Maryam's experience of divine provision reminds us that Allah's support for His chosen servants is both reliable and unlimited. The vindication that came through baby Isa's miraculous speech demonstrates Allah's perfect timing in defending those who trust in His plan. According to Imam as-Suyuti, Allah often allows trials to reach their most intense point before providing relief, ensuring that His intervention is recognized as divine rather than coincidental. Maryam's patient silence followed by supernatural vindication teaches us that Allah's defense of His servants is always more powerful than any human effort at self-justification. The scholarly consensus emphasizes that Surah Maryam serves multiple functions in the Quranic message. It provides historical testimony to one of Allah's greatest signs, establishes the true nature of Prophet Isa's mission, and offers spiritual guidance for believers seeking to deepen their relationship with Allah. Most importantly, it demonstrates that when human beings surrender completely to Allah's will, they become vessels through which His mercy and guidance flow to all of humanity. The continuing relevance of Maryam's story lies in its universal themes of faith, trust, and devotion that transcend cultural and temporal boundaries. According to modern Islamic scholars, her example provides guidance for believers facing social pressure to compromise their faith, encouragement for those experiencing trials that seem beyond their capacity to endure, and inspiration for all who seek to serve Allah's plan despite personal cost or social misunderstanding. As we conclude our journey through Surah Maryam, we are reminded that this blessed chapter continues to serve its original purpose, guiding human hearts toward recognition of Allah's unlimited power and inspiring souls to trust in His wisdom even when His plan surpasses human comprehension. Through Maryam's extraordinary story, we witness not only the miracle of virgin birth but the even greater miracle of a human soul so perfectly aligned with divine will that it becomes an eternal source of guidance and inspiration. May Allah grant us the blessing of following Maryam's example in our own lives, developing the depth of faith that trusts His plan beyond understanding, the purity of devotion that makes us suitable vessels for His blessings, and the patience that endures trials while maintaining complete confidence in His wisdom and mercy. And may we be among those who are reunited with Maryam, peace be upon her, in the highest levels of paradise, in the company of the prophets, the righteous and the pure. Ameen. Thank you for resting with me and listening to these reminders from the Qur'an. If you like to continue this journey of peace and reflection, please subscribe for future episodes. Together we can keep learning and finding calm through the words of Allah.